So support for this episode comes from NordVPN. Using a virtual private network is key to protecting your internet connection and privacy online. One of the main reasons I use NordVPN is for security. NordVPN protects all my sensitive data, like my passwords, my credit card numbers, from hackers. So how does it work? When you turn on a VPN like Nord, all of your browsing data will move along on an encrypted tunnel between your laptop and a secure external server. This means even if a hacker did intercept any of my data, all they'll be able to do is see encrypted gibberish. I use it all the time when I'm traveling, and it only costs the price of a cup of coffee per month. To get the best discount off NordVPN's plan, go to nordvpn.com/tripus. That is nordvpn.com/tripus. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. There's no risk with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. So again, just go to nordvpn.com/TRIPUS. The link is also in the podcast episode description box.
Welcome to The Rest is Politics US. I'm Katty K.
And I'm Anthony Scaramucci. How are you, Katty? I'm upstate New York here. I'll give you a little window here. This is.
Oh my God. You're just doing this to make us feel jealous. You're actually in a ski resort, probably even skiing.
No. I'm at my house. But I want to show you something else because I think this is important for you people in Europe. Hold on one second. That's a television. You see that? That's a television. I just want to point out that.
Yeah, because you weren't impressed with my television the other day.
Yeah, because people in Europe, they don't understand what a television is. I thought I would educate them. That's a television, Katty K.
Okay, hold on a second, because I'm in London, fighting a London cold. Although I know that Alistair Campbell says you're never allowed to mention that you're feeling sick because that's a sign of weakness, which again, a little bit bonfire of the vanities for me. I am fighting a cold. I'm in London. Here's my view. That is what I'm looking at.
It's nice.
It's just
great.
great.
When I see that, I think of college. I think of my time in London in college. 40 years ago, I arrived in London for the first time. It wasn't quite like the Beatles going to New York, but it was sort of like that for me, Katty.
You mean they were kind of waiting at Heathrow, crowds of people for you?
They weren't actually. I was on like a dingy bus on my way to like a pensione or something like that. So what do you want to talk about today?
So I thought it would be interesting. You and I were going back and forth on, obviously there's all these cabinet nominations happening this week, but there's been quite a lot said and written about the ideological diversity within the Trump cabinet that may surprise people. And I thought it was kind of interesting to look at where that comes from and more importantly, what it might lead to. Are we looking at a really good team of rivals, Doris Kearns Goodwin style, who's obviously the historian who's written a lot about that, and Abraham Lincoln? Or are we looking at potential for sort of middle school brawls? And I thought that's a good place to start. And then in the second half, we're going to look at the California fires, but from the point of view of politics and the kind of political rumblings that have emerged, the political arguments that have emerged between the California Democrats and the incoming Trump administration and the Republicans, and what that could mean for the future for Democrats. Let's start with the cabinet picks. I mean, all the hearings are happening this week. We are recording this on Wednesday. We've had a couple of them by the time we're recording this. It looks to me right now that Trump's team is expecting a pretty smooth process. One of the hardest ones was expected to be Pete Hegseth, but Democrats tried to land some punches. No Republicans did. And it looks like the Republicans are united. And so he looks likely to get confirmed. And I imagine that means that the other nominees are going to get confirmed too. I'm thinking a little bit differently about this. I don't know what you're thinking, Anthony, compared to where we were. I want to get into the diversity, but just quickly to bring us up to date on where we think we are on these picks, because I think you and I both thought in December, end of November, early December, that there would be more resistance to some of these picks because some of them are kind of out of the bounds of American history, normal political history, and several of them have never held positions that would normally qualify them for these kind of responsibilities. But my sense at the moment is that he gets all of them. What do you think?
I would say yes, but what about Tulsi Gabbard? I think she may have some issues because of her past and like the background check. Maybe not. I mean, I think you're more likely to be right than not. But if there's one person that doesn't make it, it would be Tulsi Gabbard. But I just want to test something on you. I was just thinking about this all morning. We all talk about in our lives the butterfly effect. You miss a train, you go to an interview, you decide not to go to an interview, and all the different impacts it has on you. But I want to start with Democrat incompetence. And I want to talk about how that it's led us to where we are right now. So Joe Biden's about to give his farewell address. In general, the administration was quite good. I know Republicans will disagree with that, and people on X will disagree with that. But he tried to fight back on Vladimir Putin. No war in Taiwan, thank God. The economy is actually reasonably strong post-COVID. The inflation was inducted into the economy because of COVID. They've done a reasonable job of containing it. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. is the strongest economy in the world relative to the other economies.
Are you trying to make friends in MAGA world? Because I don't think this is going to help you.
No, it's not. No, I'm not trying. Well, I have no friends. Well, I still have friends in MAGA world. Not many, but I still have friends in MAGA world. But so now they blow the presidential election. Let's just be honest with everybody. They blow. They don't give her enough time. She doesn't have a democratic process to get through a primary. And he narrowly wins. Donald Trump narrowly wins. But he's the master of exaggeration. And so he is bombastically telling people he has this wild Ronald Reagan-like landslide.
Yeah.
And something is happening, Katty, that I want you to react to.
Which is not true, by the way. We should point that out to people. That's not true. It was a pretty narrow victory in the end.
No, it's completely not true. But let me tell you something about projection and creating some self-fulfilling prophecy. So he's out there beating his chest. He's got something very powerful. We can't underestimate the power of X. You go on X, all it is a right-wing propaganda, right-wing push. The fires are due to incompetence, not nature. Everything about Donald Trump is great. Everything about the woke left is bad. All of that, of course, isn't true, but that's what's going on. And then here's the number one thing for our viewers and listeners outside of the United States, Katty: money. How do you say money in French, Katty? You know how to speak French. How do you say money in French?
Beaucoup, beaucoup, beaucoup d'argent. Lots and lots and lots of dollars.
Now, how to say the word money in England, right? They don't speak money in England, but we don't speak
we don't say
money.
That word. It doesn't exist.
But in the U.S., let me tell you why you're probably going to be right about all the confirmations. Money, Katty K, money. Because the waterfall is hitting Donald Trump right now. He's played it like a fiddle. He's got oligarchs descending on Mar-a-Lago. They're going to dump about $500 million on him. Oh, by the way, give Donald Trump $1 million. Poo-poo. Give him $5 million. It starts to get interesting. Give him $10 million and maybe $40 million for his wife to have a puffy documentary. Now we're talking, you have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And the Democrats are watching. They'll say they're for the little guy and all that sort of stuff, but they need the big guy to get reelected. And this is something that's going to go down over the next 18 months. Just watch. Democrats are looking at the money that Donald Trump is getting. And they're saying to themselves, okay, we need some of that. What do you call it? The buku? Yeah, they need some of that, Katty K. And that's what's going on right now. So that's why you're probably going to be right that you're going to get these confirmations through.
Yeah, you've even got, Meta now having its own ball at the inauguration. Anyone who is anyone with any money, any of that stuff we don't talk about, is getting themselves an inauguration ball on Monday night. I hope you're going to be there, Anthony, in your tuxedo. No, you'll be in Davos with the global elite who are not popular at the moment.
No, I'm going to be in Davos, Switzerland with the European elites, Katty. Because I'm a bougie person. The funny thing about you is that you are actually a really bougie person, but you're in denial. Yeah. I'm like a self-declared bougie person. I'll be hosting a wine party in Davos, Switzerland the day after the inauguration. I was invited to the crypto ball. Oh, you can come anytime. You have an open invitation. Okay. I've got I think Alistair and Rory are going to be there, by the way. So
well, I will be up on Capitol Hill for the BBC from 7 a.m. reporting on this inauguration. I think Monday, by the way, before we get into the cabinet, is going to be news tsunami in Washington, because Trump is going to want to come in and announce a whole load of executive orders, some of which may stick, some of which won't stick, but he's going to want to come in with a bang. So keep your schedule free on Monday. Look, that what you said about the money, I think brings us to this idea of this cabinet, which does have this interesting range of ideological perspectives. I mean, if you just kind of run through it briefly, you've got on the national security side, you've got sort of more traditional Republicans who see America as a global leader, like Marco Rubio, Waltz, who's coming in as the national security advisor. This is somebody who was very supportive of American aid to Ukraine, didn't actually vote for the last package, but was very supportive of all the previous packages. Marco Rubio, who has called Vladimir Putin a thug and a gangster, up against somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who a kind of Trump supporter and former advisor described to me as, the peacenik in the group. He said she's like the Jimmy Carter of this administration. So you've got quite different views of how America should operate, including, of course, people like Elon Musk, who does not support aid to Ukraine. So you've got that on the national security side. On the economic side, you've got Scott Bessent coming in as Treasury Secretary. Again, more old school, traditional Republican views, although he supported George Soros in the past, worked for George Soros in the past, gave money to Al Gore's campaign, but more of the traditional kind of free market, pro-Wall Street. He's up against, again, people like J.D. Vance, who has said that Wall Street has no more truck anymore in this administration. We're done catering to Wall Street, J.D. Vance said, much more populist. You've got people like the woman who's nominated to be the Labor Secretary, Congresswoman Lori Chavez de Rima, who's much more pro-union, pro-worker safety regulations. Again, definitely not in the Scott Bessent side of things. Then, of course, on the health side, you've got Kennedy, who is pro-choice in an administration that ran on restricting abortion rights, who's not even on the same page on vaccines as some of the other people who've been nominated to run the healthcare in America by Donald Trump. So you have, it's interesting. One Trump kind of ally who speaks to the president fairly regularly said to me, this is Obama's administration was full of parrots. They were all people that had the same ideological and political positions. And this is an administration shaping up to be an administration with a whole load of different positions, but they have one thing in common, which is they have to stay loyal to Donald Trump. And that's this court idea. You've got all of these different people vying for the attention of one man. It's not so much ideological as a question of, as a kind of test of fealty. And I think what's interesting is, where does that take us? Is this shaping up to be a kind of fantastically interesting team of rivals where you get different perspectives and that ultimately produces the best result, and they hash it out and have arguments and they come to some kind of consensus based on great results? I'm asking that with kind of a smile in my face. Or is this a kind of middle school classroom where everyone's trying to be teacher's pet? And I think we don't know yet. We don't know what this diversity is going to lead to. What do you think of that, those two possibilities?
When I hear the word team of rivals, I always think of Doris Kearns Goodwin, the historian who wrote the book Team of Rivals, describing Abraham Lincoln, bringing in all of these people that thought they should have been president, and they thought he was a less than average Illinois lawyer that somehow got to the presidency and outskated them in the world of politics. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that Lincoln had a way about him. He had a way about him of understanding and containing his ego. And he was a little bit like an orchestra conductor, where he got the people in symphony with him to do the things that he wanted to do.
Did he listen to the alternative points of view, Lincoln? Was he keen to have those alternative points of view expressed? That was how it worked.
That's what he was most famous for. And of course, there's a very famous situation where they're going to have this Emancipation Proclamation and nobody's really for it. And Lincoln goes around the cabinet table and he says, okay, where are the ayes? Where are the nays? He goes, okay, there are 9 nays and there's 1 aye. And so the ayes have it. Okay, meaning, he's the one, right? And everyone laughs, of course, and finds it very funny, but he did listen.
Kind of Trumpian, let's face it.
That was Trumpian, but in general, he was not Trumpian. And now you've got this situation. And so I spent my whole career as a research analyst, analyzing companies and analyzing the trajectory of where things were going in the market. And we always say that past performance is not indicative of future results, but that's the stock market. In politics, if you study Donald Trump's personality, is it really going to be that different this time? If it is, okay, that team of rivals, great, he's going to be Lincoln-esque and he's going to figure out a way to get them to sing in concert with each other, or are half of them going to be gone in the first year?
Yeah.
And so I'm taking the latter bet on that. And so I was looking at Pete Hegseth yesterday. And I said, Pete's going to get in there. And I have nothing against Pete Hegseth. You know that. People were accusing him of drunkenness in a restaurant that I own in New York. I went out on Twitter and said, that never happened. So let's not put fake news on the guy. Is he competent enough to be the Secretary of the Treasury? Does he have the experience enough to be Secretary of Treasury? I don't think so.
We don't know, but can I just push back there? We don't know that all of these are fake news, these allegations of drunkenness. And again, there have been, and even one Trump supporter has said to me that they have concerns about these allegations of sexual abuse against him. So,
and I'm not saying those aren't true. I'm saying the ones that were targeted at him.
I don't know that he's lily white, this guy.
100%. But I'm saying the ones that were targeted at him related to things that I know factually were not true.
Right.
And that's Washington. I understand the ugliness of Washington and they want to tar and feather each other. But I'm looking at Pete Hegseth and I've got him lasting 1 year. Can we do a little sweepstakes? Okay, the labor secretary. I have no idea who she is. Okay.
Former Congresswoman from Oregon, lost her run.
She'll last 4 years, Katty Gang. I don't know who you are. You probably don't listen to our podcast, but if you are listening to our podcast, lay low. Be the Ben Carson of the administration. You'll last 4 years. Hegseth will be gone in a year. The reason why is he's a colorful, charismatic, good-looking guy. And Donald Trump's not going to like that. It's going to wear on Donald Trump. 1 year, bye-bye Pete Hegseth. How many defense secretaries did Donald Trump go through in 4 years? Do you know the answer to that? Because I couldn't believe the answer. I had to check it 4 times.
He had Mattis, Esper,
Miller, and 2 others. He had 2
acting ones.
Actually.
He had a total of 5.
He
Wow.
had a total of 5. He had 3 in the last 6 months. Mattis and Esper, and then he had 3 more after Esper blew up because they kept rotating out. He wanted them to do things that they weren't willing to do, and they said bye-bye. And he kept having these active ones in place. Even after the insurrection, I think he ended up with another active one. But he had 5 defense secretaries in 4 years. Listen, I could be wrong about all this. I'm not saying I'm omniscient or even prescient, but I'm just going off of his behavior, Katty. So yes, ideological differences, but there's one guy and there's one ideology, and that is Donald Trump. Get in his way, do something that he doesn't like. He'll start tweeting at you. He'll start truth socialing you. There's somebody that disappeared. Remember I talked about J.D. Vance had disappeared? Vivek Ramaswamy has disappeared. Vivek Ramaswamy went into the Starship Enterprise teleporter and they beamed him somewhere. We can't find out where he landed. He didn't materialize anywhere. He's been absent for the last 15 days.
He's not there in your ski resort under your desk?
No, he's not. I'm not even looking for him under my desk. There was a chance that JD was there. That's why I looked for him. But I know he has disappeared. And he disappeared after Susie Wiles said no more tweeting. You see, he was chanting this H-1B or whatever the exact thing is about our immigration stuff, and they didn't like it. And they told him, you don't speak for the president. Stop tweeting. And then to cover him, they issued a blanket statement. Okay, so now I'm going to make a prediction here on our podcast. He is lobbying right now to be the senator from the great state of Ohio. So he knows that he's been neutered. He's been decapitated by the Trump people. He stopped tweeting and he's like, okay, maybe I can back into being the senator from Ohio where I'm a MAGA supporter. I'm pro-MAGA legislation. And then I can build my political career from the former J.D. Vance seat. Why am I bringing all this up? I'm bringing all this up because I'm hearing this from the MAGA people. And I'm also hearing that they're uber confident. And I can tell you one thing about the MAGA people. When they're uber confident, very bad stuff happens. Very bad stuff happens because they always overplay their hand, Katty.
I'm hearing exactly the same uber confidence. It's interesting you bring that up. I heard it on a call yesterday with somebody in MAGA world. It's combined with a real kind of questioning of the media's future, the need to get back at Trump's political enemies. And I think that's when it kind of starts getting into its most destructive elements. But I am definitely hearing confidence. And if you look at somebody like talking of these, you said people's character doesn't change very much. But actually, I went back and I listened to Donald Trump talking about his first nominee for Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, and how proud he was to have nominated him. And he kept talking about his character and how he was the best general there was, and everybody in the Department of Defense loved him. And that seemed at that stage in 2017 to matter to Donald Trump. And maybe Donald Trump was more insecure about his role as president. He'd never been president, but there was a kind of respect for the office of the Secretary of Defense, a respect in a way for the kind of institutions, a desire to please people with this very impressive general who he had picked. And I think if you look at just that Secretary of Defense position from 2017, when you had Trump nominating somebody like Jim Mattis, who, by the way, ended up getting broad Democratic support. He was confirmed 98-1 votes in the Senate. To Pete Hegseth, who has zero Democratic support, I think it shows you the journey that Trump has come on and the confidence that Trump now has about his role, the confidence he has about the MAGA agenda, about his agenda compared to 2017. This is not somebody who he's trying to say, this is the best general there is. This is somebody who's good on television, doesn't have particularly the experience, certainly has split the Armed Services Committee in the Senate along political lines. And the Armed Services Committee was one of the very few committees, even in times of divided American politics, that really did stick together on votes. I mean, they really voted on the issues, Democrats voting for Republican proposals and vice versa. And I do think the way that this has split the Armed Services Committee and the defense community is not very good for American national security. But what's interesting in it is it shows me Trump's own journey. And you can see it in that one nomination. You mentioned Rubio and you mentioned Hegseth not lasting a year. I wonder whether Marco Rubio is another one that doesn't survive. I mean, the stark differences between Marco Rubio and Tulsi Gabbard. How does between Marco Rubio and Elon Musk, who I'm here in Britain, Elon Musk is playing havoc with British politics. If you're trying to run American foreign policy, as Marco Rubio is hoping that he'll have some tiny role in doing so, how do you stick around when you've got both Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth running Department of Defense? What's his role going to be there? I don't give him much more than a year. Do you?
It's a different thing. I don't want to push back on you because you got great insights and instincts, but it's a different thing because of Susie Wiles.
Push away.
If you tell me Susie Wiles is leaving, I'll tell you that he's leaving, Marco Rubio. But if Susie Wiles is staying in that position and she's been able to work with Trump for 3 years now, she'll guide him. She'll guide Rubio. She likes Rubio. She wants Rubio on the team. She thinks Rubio's a sane person.
He's part of the Florida. I mean, that's the other thing that's interesting about this cabinet is how many people there are from Florida. And he's a Florida ally of hers.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that I think that you should look at from a perspective. It's who's with Susie and who's not with Susie. And the people that are not with Susie, bye-bye. Okay. Matt Gaetz was not with Susie. Okay. And he didn't even get to the starting block. Pam Bondi is with Susie. And so I think there's that. But I want to go back to something you said about the splits. So Obama caused that, and Harry Reid caused that. And so for the historians listening to our podcast, Harry Reid is the one that, Mitch McConnell said, don't change these rules in the Senate. We've got to have a 2/3 vote. If you change it to a 51-49, I promise to use that against you. And he did, of course, with these Supreme Court nominations. And Obama did it because Obama wanted Obamacare in place and the Republicans didn't want it. And he went very hard down party lines and he set the tempo. And Trump he injected himself with like anabolic steroids and went steroidal on this divide. Pete Hegseth is I'm shoving this up your you-know-what sort of a nomination. Okay, none of you are going to vote for the guy. I don't care. I want to own you. Because, part of my platform, MAGA, is own the libs. I've got to get Joe and Mika's hair on fire. I've got to set the hair on fire of other MSNBC hosts. Alistair Campbell, I know you listen to our podcast. You still have some hair on the top of your head, unlike Dominic Sandbrook. Your hair goes on fire every time Trump does this. And he wants that, okay? And you have to understand that And when you do that, it's very, very hard to govern, Katty. Very hard to govern. So this may all work out beautifully, and there's this beautiful symphony of mixtures of ideologies and stuff like that. But I predict this will be like a billiard table with Trump being the white cue ball smashing into these people.
I mean, it's not just about owning the libs. The Hegseth nomination and the journey we've gone through over the last 6 weeks is about owning the Republicans too. Is about making this too risky for them to vote for somebody that they either have ethical or ideological differences with, in the case of Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa, or they think is incompetent. But he has shown this has been his test again. It's this court idea that we've gone back to, the pre-French Revolution, that it's the Sun King. And he has proved that you can't afford, if you are a Republican, to oppose him, because the campaign that was mounted against Joni Ernst was not withstandable. So now Republicans are in a position where their votes are weighing up risks. Are they going to risk voting for yes to somebody who is incompetent and the whole thing blows up in their faces and they get tarnished with that? Or are they going to risk voting no to one of Trump's picks and finding themselves, in an onslaught of MAGA world and being primaried and being trashed online by MAGA supporters? So they're kind of constantly weighing the risks. And at the moment,
not going to do it. Too much money. Not doing it. Too
Trump's
much money
won.
hitting Trump. Yeah, I agree. Everything you just said, I agree with. They're not going to do that. So let's say I'm wrong. Hegseth makes it. He's a 4-year defense secretary. Mm-hmm. Okay, he is a 2028 presidential candidate. Here are the other ones. If Marco Rubio makes it, he is a 2028 presidential candidate. J.D. Vance has to make it, barring, God forbid, a health issue, because he's the only one Trump can't fire. He was democratically elected to that position. So I've got the sweepstakes in 28. Hegseth, Rubio, J.D. Vance, Mike Pompeo, Chris Christie. It could be hard for Nikki Haley this time, but maybe her. What's your reaction to that? So in other words, I know that we're sitting here thinking about who's going to get nominated and confirmed, but I'm telling you how they think. J.D. Vance is looking out and saying, who is my competition for the MAGA baton, but also the new Republicans? Because Trump is a cult of personality, Katty. MAGA will be part of the forward movement, but it won't be the forward movement. It can't be all of it because it's driven by Trump's personality. So who takes the mantle of leadership from the Republicans in 28? They're thinking about it. What say you?
The people you mentioned are all in the same sort of area of the Republican Party. Rubio may be a little more old school. He may be a bit more traditional, but certainly Hegseth, Vance, they're in this more populist wing of the Republican Party. Chris Christie, I guess, is different. If you really think that, you mentioned him, right? You really think he might run? I mean, one MAGA person said to me that he thinks what happens with Rubio is Rubio realizes he can't have a success as Secretary of State. He's basically neutered. He said, Rubio is a neocon and he's having to park his guns at the door. This is the end of the kind of neocon interventionist movement, and Rubio is out of step. So he gets neutered. He steps down after a year and he decides that he can't run as president in 2028. So he starts lobbying to be Vance's VP. In that world, Vance comes out of this as the heir apparent. And the other thing I think that's interesting is that in 2 years' time, this conversation moves on, right, from Trump. I mean, that everybody recognizes that the Republican leadership conversation train has left the station and Trump is still standing on the platform in 2 years' time. He is no longer really relevant in terms of personality.
I think this is all interesting how it's playing out. There's a lot of players, and I think Trump likes attention. He likes the chaos. He likes the craziness. He will start shooting at them. Okay, he's got the cue stick in his hand. He will start firing that cue ball at them, and we'll see who's standing, Katty. But I'm sitting here. I'm reading X, and it's going beautifully for them, and they're all going to get along great. And we're in this new golden age of America. We're going to take Greenland. In fact, we don't even have to take it militarily. They're just going to hand it to us. The Panama Canal will probably be the American Canal. We're changing the Gulf to the Gulf of America, and everything's going to go beautifully. Everything's going to go beautifully.
Last week, you were going to take the United Kingdom as well, so throw that in.
Yeah, well, I just I suggested that, but then I almost got fired by Goldhanger. So I just want to retract.
You realize you'd hit a nerve. That was it just like got a little.
Taking the United Kingdom. I apologize to all the producers and owners of Goldhanger. I just want to retract that statement.
Unreservedly, you'll have your lawyers contacting them. You thought that famous British sense of irony would get the joke.
Yes, exactly. I want to sell MAGA hopium on Amazon. Okay, because Jeff is now a fan of Trump's. Let's earn MAGA hopium on Amazon. Everything's going to go swimmingly well. But I don't see that, Katty. I see a nightmare ahead for these people. And I see these people on the Trump rotisserie. And I think they're going to get their asses kicked. That's just what I think.
I think it's the middle school brawl vying to be teacher's pet. And that is not a great recipe for effective government.
I just want to tell you there's a reason why Ivanka Trump is not going back. There's a reason. She gave an interview the other day and she said, I love policy and I love impact, but I hate politics. And here are the words. Ready? Very dark, negative business. Very dark, negative business. I don't want that infused into my life anymore.
Ivanka made it very clear at the end of the last administration that she was not happy with what happened on January the 6th. We talked about this in our series that we've got running at the moment, Ivanka's role in trying to get her father to do something about the riots of January the 6th. And I think she was very disturbed by what she saw. And she is somebody who is known for being very careful about her own image and reputation. And I think she has decided that politics is not going to help her reputation, not necessarily help her as a businesswoman. And maybe she's also decided that it's not great for her family life, that, that if she's calling it dark and negative, I don't think that's a reflection of the Biden administration. I think that's a reflection of her experiences in the Trump administration and possibly of this election campaign.
No, that's her experience of what happened.
She doesn't want any part of it. That's interesting. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and then we will come back talking of dark and negative and talk about the political responses to the wildfires in California, which have not been particularly harmonious. Welcome back to The Rest is Politics US. We are going to talk about the California wildfires, which have just been so awful over the last week. We didn't get much of a chance to mention them last week. I know people that have lost their homes. I imagine you do too, Anthony. It's been very grim, super sad. Many people who don't have insurance. There's been a lot of focus on the kind of A-listers who have lost homes, but a lot of working Americans have lost homes too, and they don't have insurance and they're now kind of camped out and don't know what's going to happen to them. So it's really devastating. And you would think that in this moment of crisis, Americans might come together. And American leaders in particular might come together. But I think one of the most depressing things that we've seen over the last few days is the speed with which the political body fell apart over this and dissolved into kind of accusations and counter accusations, not just Republicans against Democrats, but even in the Democratic Party in California. You had the governor, Gavin Newsom, who we spoke about last year as a possible contender for the presidency on the Democratic side, saying that he hadn't been given straight answers by his own deputies. So you've even got this kind of, infighting going on amongst Democrats. I don't know that this is much help at all to the people who are living in California at the moment, who are living in Los Angeles and need help. Am I naive to be dismayed by the speed with which the country and the country's political bodies moved from, oh my God, this is awful, how can we rally together to help people, to it's your fault, it's your fault?
Well, I mean, that's the political class that we're in now, though. That's the culture now. The culture
right?
of service. Oh, sure. I mean, the culture of service in the 1940s and the 1950s. Remember Harry Truman, in order to get the Truman Doctrine put in place, he needed Vanderburg, who was the Republican senator in the Senate, to work alongside of him. And we could go one after the other, successive things that had to happen. The wall came down. It was on Reagan's watch, but it was 40 years of a policy of containment that started with Harry Truman that both sides stuck to. And there was, even though mistakes were being made, the Vietnam War, et cetera, there was a commitment to service, and there was an idea that, we're going to put the interests of the country, we're going to put the interests of the people involved in the situation ahead of ourselves. But that's not the case now. There's a crisis. Can we go for the jugular? Can we change public opinion in California? California is a one-party state, Katty. I think one-party states are always dangerous. I live in a one-party state in New York. Invariably, when you have one-party states, you get a sclerosis of government. And you have one-party states, you get some kind of bloatation of taxation, and you get mismanagement. You need a rigorous two-party system in the United States. That's what's made us successful. And so the Democrats have now been labeled as incompetent for handling these fires. And rather, Trump could have had a big moment. Trump had a big moment. He could have said, hey, we can get to what happened and the autopsy of the fire later. Let's do everything we can to get these fires out. What are we going to do at the federal level? What are we going to do, Republicans and Democrats, to get the fires out and help the people? We didn't do that. He's a small man. He doesn't have the capacity for that type of leadership. That type of leadership requires you to take the spotlight off yourself and put the spotlight on others. He needed to call Gavin Newsom and say, hey, Gavin, you suck, and I know you think I suck, but half of Southern California is on fire. How are you and I going to work together to put the fire out? And if he had done that, people would have looked around and said, well, whoa, this is the type of leadership that the country's begging. The world is begging for this type of leadership. But Trump doesn't have that. You know, like I've said to you, you can't put into somebody what God left out. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. And so he looked at it and said, oh, you know, I'm wearing a hat now as I play golf. Trump is right about everything. You ever see this stupid hat that he's wearing? He wore the other hat, Make America Great Again, 45, 47. Now he's got a hat where it actually comes down into the visor, the words, Trump is right about everything. And he's walking around with this hat. I mean, he is the jackass of jackasses. And now he's out there proselytizing that they needed to rake the forest and they needed to divert water. And a lot of the stuff that he's saying is actually not true. It's massive disinformation.
Which doesn't help in the moment when you're in. It doesn't help.
What he's saying is hurting the Democrats.
I agree that what he's saying is hurting the Democrats, and calling Gavin Newsom an incompetent poll, or he said all of them are incompetent polls. They just can't put out the fires. What's wrong with them? And it's not clear that the things that Donald Trump has criticized Democrats for doing would actually have made a difference. Or, you know, he said the reservoirs would have been full. The reservoirs are full except for the one reservoir that's being mended. I mean, so there is quite a lot of misinformation in what he's putting out. Here's the risk for Donald Trump. I mean, you talk about California being a one-party state. In the 2024 election, Democrats won California by 20 points. You're right. Big majority. It's definitely a blue state. But it's a little bit less blue than it was 4 years ago, because in 2020, Democrats won the state by 30 points. So California is actually a little bit less Democratic, a little bit more Republican than it was even 4 years ago. And I wonder whether this slamming of California and the not just slamming California's leaders, but the threats that you have had from Republican senators like Senator Tommy Tuberville, from the Speaker Mike Johnson, from Donald Trump himself, suggesting that they may not give California the aid it needs to rebuild after these fires and clear up. And it's going to cost a fortune to clear this debris away. I mean, we've all seen the pictures. The threat that he's not going to help California, I wonder if that's actually in the Republicans' best interest when they're actually getting something of a foothold in California at the moment. Do you think that is an argument? Because it's an argument, by the way, that has had some impact on him before.
You're 100% correct, but let's go over the Trump way, right? The Trump way is a bullying philosophy. The Trump way is I'm going to push and shove and threaten Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is then going to kowtow to me. Millions of dollars for the Congress, the congressional elections, $1 million for my inaugural, $40 million for my wife's documentary. I'm going to push and shove. You pick the person, Elon Musk. He was on his knees. He was on his knees in the Oval Office begging me for anything. Elon Musk shows up now with a $300 million. And so the bullying, if you're on my side, you're safe. Oligarchy. If you're not on my side, you may end up in jail. I've got buddies of mine to think they're going to jail. I've had people call me and say, am I okay? I've said really bad things about Donald Trump on TV. Is he going to prosecute me? Are they going to put me in jail? That's the Trump way, Katty K. So you're with me or you're not with me, and then you could get my retribution. You could get my punishing, bullying revenge. Now, I don't know. I don't know. That's not a Hollywood story. Remember what we say about Hollywood. You say whatever you want about Hollywood. It is the dream factory of America.
I love that description.
But that's what it is. And when the people saw those movies in European movie houses and theaters, they idealized America. And now we got Donald Trump coming in. It's my way or the highway. I'm going to jam down all this disinformation down your throat. And oh, by the way, my new buddy, who I bullied, we're going to use his $44 billion megaphone to pump this disinformation. And let's see if we can bully California from being a blue state into a red state. And I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But I'll tell you what, I think what would have really worked is we got a problem. We're going to figure out what the problem is later. Right now, we have people's homes on fire and people that are dying and people that have lost everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm calling Joe Biden and I'm calling Gavin Newsom, and I'm going to work with them. 3 months from now, we can start shooting peas at each other and blaming each other for what happened. But I just find that if my house was on fire, I guess what I'm saying is there's no political empathy, Katty.
Yeah.
If my house was on fire, do I want Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom peeing on each other? No, put the house at a fire. Stop peeing on each other.
It's pretty, in a way, it's pretty simple, right? What you want from government is competency and compassion. And there's been a lack of competency in California. I think the fact that Karen Bass, who is the mayor of Los Angeles, went on the record and said if she was voted mayor of Los Angeles, she would not take international travel. She would be focused on California. And where was she when these fires broke out? She was in Ghana, West Africa, for the inauguration of the new president. That she didn't need to be in Ghana.
But she doesn't care. See, I'm going to say whatever it is to get me elected, and then I'm going to do whatever I want.
Yeah. And it's super disappointing for the people of Los Angeles who voted to elect her. Not just that she wasn't there and how she's handled it, but she said one thing and then did another. I think it's more than just California politics. And this is what interests me about this, is the speed with which this has become, from the kind of MAGA world, a more meta argument about the problem with Democrats is that they are incompetent because they had what Senator Tuberville called inner city woke policies. And so it's become a kind of anti-DEI argument against Democrats that I think is going to be very powerful for Republicans, not just in California, but around the country. Now, that argument, actually, if you drill it down, means that what they're saying is women were elected into office who didn't deserve to be because they were women. Black people were elected into office who were elected and didn't deserve to be because they were Black. Hispanics were elected into office and didn't deserve to be because they were Hispanic. I think there is a kind of danger to that argument. But I think they've sort of in this California fire, they have been writing the template for how they are going to attack Democrats, not just in California, but right around the country for the next 4 years. Every time something goes wrong in a Democratic state, or every time there's a disaster, natural disaster or otherwise in a Democratic city or state, the argument is going to be, see, if you hadn't been so woke, if you hadn't had DEI policies in place, then you wouldn't be in this position. And I don't buy that argument. We've spoken about this often. There's been an excessive wokeness and cancel culture, but it's an easy argument to make at a time when people are suffering, and it doesn't always actually add up.
Why are they winning that argument?
Maybe because wokeism went too far on the left. Always with misinformation, there's a grain of truth. Let me give you an example that was super interesting this week that was reported in the Wall Street Journal. Alex Jones, who is Mr. Misinformation, kind of par excellence coming from the right. He is the guy who said that the awful Sandy Hook massacre of 26 children was staged and was a kind of Hollywood event and didn't actually happen. He was fined billions of dollars, but he's still out there, guess where, on Twitter with his 29 million followers. And what did he say this week? He said, the firemen are using ladies' handbags to put out the fires in California. It's not true. Firemen carry with them canvas bags because sometimes using a canvas bag that holds water is quicker for them to put out small embers and small brush fires than going to the fire hydrant. It's all over the United States. That is the policy of firefighters. They carry these canvas bags with them. But he's now put it out there that they're using ladies' handbags. So that gets spread to his 30 million followers. There is a grain of truth in some of this, but it jumps the shark and becomes an argument that is not true. And I think the same is happening on the right. Yeah, there are instances where it went too far. Wokeism went too far. Cancel culture went too far. My 19-year-old daughter would tell you that cancel culture, she grew up with it. She was at the peak age, Gen Z, of cancel culture. She hates it. And it went too far in some American universities and in newspapers and organizations. But that doesn't mean that the whole premise of diversity, equity, inclusion, which many business leaders would tell you, actually, we talked about in this the first half of the program, you get diverse points of view around the table, you come up with a better business decision. It actually can be helpful. And the idea that people have been elected just because they're Black or just because they're a woman is sort of dismissive of their talents anyway. I think there is a risk there of dismissing people who are women or Black, just they only got that job because they're a woman or because they're Black. But I think it's an easy argument to weaponize. And I can see it being weaponized in California already. And you can see that being a template for the next 4 years.
I want to give you the counter narrative. I mean, everything you said, I think is true. The handbag thing, I watched that play itself out in terms of the different screeds. There's I guess a woman who is a lesbian in charge of the LA Fire Department. And so now that's a big stink for Elon Musk and these guys because she's a lesbian. So therefore, definitionally, she has to be incompetent and this, that, and the other thing. But that, obviously, you and I both know that isn't true. But, right. But what I don't understand is where is the counter narrative? Where are people going? Like Mark Cuban tried to make the counter narrative and he got destroyed. The counter narrative is, hey, I don't care if you're green and you're a green lesbian from Mars. If you can play, I want you on my basketball team, right? And the point is that if I'm just sticking to white men, that's a stereotype that white men are competent. They may or may not be competent.
Right. And also you may not be understanding your markets as well, because actually your customers probably aren't all white 100%. Men. So you want,
100%.
different points of view around the table.
Of course. And expanding that universe gives me more opportunity to find super competent people. Moreover, and I'll probably get canceled for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you are Black or a lesbian, or you are in a category that does get stereotyped negatively, chances are you're trying 10 times harder than everybody else to get to the position that you're in. And therefore, you may be more talented. I have interviewed so many CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, and the move that they have to make in terms of their work ethic and their calibration and their perfectionism is way more. It's way more, Katty. And so to me, I don't understand how they've lost this argument. I don't understand it. But I will say this. When Elon Musk bought Twitter, now known as X, people said, ha ha, ho ho, this guy finally stepped in it. He's blown through $44 billion and he's got a big L on his forehead. Fast forward, he's turned this into a $200 billion improvement in the valuation of SpaceX and Tesla. He's turned it into this megaphone for this type of narration. And I guess my question to you is, who owns the narrative in America now, Katty? Is it Elon Musk? Is it Donald Trump? But then if they do, then why did they only win the election by 0.5%? So guys, wake up, get in there, present the narrative, because the average American's looking at it and saying, this can't be right.
So that's such a great point. I was having dinner here in London with a senior businessman here in London who was saying, why are the Democrats acting so cowed? Because they lost by a tiny amount. Whatever it is, I think the numbers are at the moment like 200,000 votes had swung the other way, we wouldn't be talking about this. And the thing the Democrats need to do now is grow a spine, figure out how to fight back, figure out what their narrative is going to be, figure out what their counter is to X.
In the immortal words of my spiritual podcast leader, Alistair Campbell, the Democrats are bedwetters, Katty K. They're bedwetters.
I think you called them jellyfish before, which I even like better. We will be back on Sunday with our question and answer for our founding members. Join us for that if you're a founding member. And if you're not a founding member, think of becoming one so that you can join us for the question and answer session, which comes out on Sunday. And otherwise, we will see you next Friday.
Sign up by going to theresispoliticsus.com. And of course, you get early access to all the different things we're doing, the Ask Me Anythings, but also the early access to the episodes like the January 6th 4-part mini-series about the insurrection, which is going to be relevant again. Just watch it unfold. Stay with us. Be a founding member, Resist Politics US. So if you want to sign up to watch us answer all of your wonderful questions every week on YouTube, just head to the Resist Politics US YouTube homepage and click join. But remember, your video subscription doesn't cover audio, so just pick whatever is best for you.
Thanks for listening.